Hey there everyone, this is Cassandra from CassandraTindall.com and we're going to be highlighting the month of February 2021. So this is a pretty historic month in my opinion, not only from the continuation of the introduction of this year. January and February really highlight what we're in for the rest of this year. But we also have the pileup of planets in Aquarius, okay? And so this is a very rare event. The last time it happened was in February of 1962. And the time before that, I believe, was 1821. So collectively, this is going to bring up a lot of themes around who's included, who's excluded, what's good for an individual versus a collective, the have-nots, how information is disseminated or controlled. And then on the personal, we're really going to be looking at, okay, well, if you're not really sure about what Aquarius means or how it applies to the house it rules in your birth chart and those life topics, this month is definitely going to bring that to your attention one way or another. So one way to, of course, look forward with our astrology is to look back. And so just with a very quick scroll through Wikipedia on February 1962, you're welcome to do the same. You'll see there's a whole pile of events there, and it will give you a little bit of an idea of some of the themes that we may come into in this cycle of the pileup of Aquarius. So just as to highlight reel is, okay, so we have JFK, who's the president of the USA at that time, and he sort of delivers a message about public welfare. So this happened as the month began, according to Wikipedia, the first presidential message entirely devoted to public welfare. So again, the idea of, what's good for the collective, helping the collective, the underdog, or giving the downtrodden a little bit of a leg up. Then on the same month, that was when the embargo against Cuba was announced. So no importation into the USA of goods manufactured in Cuba or transported through Cuba were allowed. So just within a couple of days, it was like one message for some and a different message for others. Obviously, there was probably a lot more reasoning or rationale behind those decisions that I'm not aware of. I'm not a historian of American politics by any stretch, but it does really highlight the difference between who's included and who isn't. Okay, so another thing that I found really interesting and very symbolic of intense Aquarius energy was a couple of more things where an American comedian, Danny Thomas, founded a hospital, basically sort of saved up his money and wanted to help those who were unemployed and penniless, that he could build a shrine to St. Jude, who was the patron saint of the lost and helpless. So basically, if he became successful, he wanted to build a hospital that treated children with no cost. Okay, so which is a pretty amazing feat to basically fund a hospital as an individual. There was also a lot of activity from like a NASA perspective. So there was the first American that was ever launched into orbit during this year. From a more arts perspective, it was an interesting thing happened where the band of Beatles, who were huge at the time, or maybe I don't know how big they were in 1962, but definitely getting there. Their drummer couldn't play a show. He was sick. Then Ringo Starr took over and he became the permanent drummer. So obviously the Beatles being a very iconic band then and even now. From a more of a celebrity standpoint, which I thought was interesting example of the controlling or the manipulation of information. I mean, it happens all the time, particularly with celebrities. But Elizabeth Taylor, who was filming the movie Cleopatra at the time, was rejected both by her lover and her husband. and attempted suicide, but it was made publicly released that she had food poisoning. So just sort of an interesting, how someone who was ridiculously famous at the time, that image was maintained or cultivated, I should say. And also too, like, I don't really know like the energy of the moment when that embargo against Cuba happened, but it was interesting that in the same month that JFK and the First Lady, Jacqueline, um, sort of brought in TV cameras into the White House, and it was filmed on TV, like a tour of TV. So there was this feeling here that there was almost like an overarching feeling of controlling the perception or the idea of certain things. Of course, as I said, nothing new, but we could really sort of see it quite, in quite a stark way, just flipping through this information listed on Wikipedia. Another thing that really stands out before we dive into the astrology of this month was that the Pope of the time made a declaration that directed the Roman Catholic seminary students, so basically men on their way to become priests, should not only be instructed on the use of the Latin language, but that lectures should be given in Latin. And then, quote, a bond of unity between the Christian peoples of Europe. Fascinating. So the idea of trying to unify people through language, and obviously religion. The Pope also prohibited priests from arguing against the use of Latin and created an institute to create new words called contemporary Latin to keep a pace of modern developments. So for my money, this is really the quintessential energy of what not only this month beholds, but this part of the great mutation after the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in Aquarius. Basically what we're just moving into collectively. So, not to be controversial or a little bit divisive, but if we see the concept of organized religion as some kind of, dare I say, cult, okay, I know it's going to be a bit controversial for some, but just take it as a more of an archetypal principle. And we're going to create a new language to help unify us, but you're not allowed to speak against it. Fascinating. So anyway, I'm just going to leave that with you. We had some famous people born this month too, of 1962. Steve Irwin, the great Aussie crocodile hunter, obviously a huge ambassador for animal rights and for conservation and for getting to know our environment and our animals, particularly here in Australia. Axl Rose, so if you are born of that era of growing up with metal, as I was, Guns N' Roses were definitely a part of growing up in the 90s, being a teenager in the 90s, as was Metallica. And each of those band members all have Saturn in Aquarius. So they're all coming through their second Saturn return now, all these 90s rockers. Okay, so I think that pretty much summarizes that month. Alrighty, so let's share my screen and we can have a little look here at what happens this month. So basically, we have the big stellium in Aquarius, and that starts, that energy really becomes even more intensified as the month begins, because that sees Venus's ingress into Aquarius. So moving from Capricorn, where she was through the bulk of January, now joining. So we've got Venus, we've got Saturn, we've got Jupiter, the Sun, and Mercury, who is retrograde, all in Aquarius. Now, by the time we get to the new moon on the 12th, so new moon in Aquarius, we will have Mercury retrograde conjoining Venus at that time. I think why this is important is because we're going to have quite a few Mercury-Venus conjunctions happening this year. The first one, obviously, this month in February. April, we'll see them come together in Taurus. May will come together in Gemini, and then Venus, the retrograde in December in Capricorn. So when these two planets come together, to me, it really feels like trying to make a negotiation of sorts, or trying to get on the same page as somebody else, or trying to understand somebody else's words or communication or point of view. I find these two planets together can work very harmoniously for maybe a common goal or cause, particularly in Aquarius. But then there's also the shadow side. Are you being manipulated with words, or are you, not in a platonic way, but more, are you hearing what you want to hear, or are you being a little bit glamoured by Venus, so to speak? So as we start this month, we've got that pile up of planets in Aquarius. We've 5 of 7 are going to be in that sign, with the exception of Mars, and of course the moon she's just moving around doing her thing. Now, so this month basically is going to help you understand what Aquarius is and what it means in your birth chart, just through the lived experience. So what I think is important to notice, rather than just, oh my God, it's a stellium in Aquarius, let's break it down a bit, because there is a lot of things happening that are maybe hidden or not fully aware of, or may come to light as the month progresses. So what you can see here is that we've got the sun there in Aquarius. Jupiter is transiting very closely, as is Saturn, and as is Venus. So everything is under the beams until we get to about the 9th, when Saturn finally starts to emerge or get enough distance, or the sun gets enough distance from Saturn. So I'm just going to show you what that looks like. So as we move to the 9th of the month, we can see that there's enough distance between, just get my little drawing bits here, there's enough distance between the sun and Saturn. So we're looking for that 15 degrees is when planets start to emerge from under the beams. 8 is considered to be combust. So how we could kind of like see this is Saturn, being the ruler of all of these planets, is now visible, and it's not being overshadowed or blinded by the light of the sun. So not only is Saturn in its domicile, Saturn in Aquarius prefers Aquarius over Capricorn. A couple of reasons for that is it's a diurnal planet, and Aquarius is a diurnal or yang or masculine sign. Saturn has triplicity in air signs, so it has more emphasis or oomph, if you like, in an air sign. Another factor too is that Aquarius is the only sign that has, it only has one planet at its helm. Nothing is exalted in Aquarius. So it's got this real purity to the sign of Aquarius as well. So what is really interesting to note is, now that Saturn is no longer under the beams, it's really now sort of in prime position to be able to take on this square to Uranus. Okay, so it's not sort of, I guess, to use an analogy, fighting from the back foot. It's not on the back foot anymore, like it's kind of able to fight in its own terms, or have this battle on its own terms. It's visible. Okay, so this increased visibility can show up in quite a dramatic way. So when this happens too, note that Venus, um, everything else is starting to come out under the beam. So Mercury is starting to come out. And there's this idea of maybe like deals being made or talk being made. And a lot of the Saturn Uranus stuff that happens this month when they make that first of 3 squares throughout 2020 may have a lot to do with information, messaging, what's going on. Okay. So one of my takes of this is what plans or goals, like if we want to personalize it for 2021 or your particular house, how can you maybe start to action, make plans around, or start to really start working on? Mercury is, of course, still retrograde, so there is a little bit of that. But there's a feeling of needing to maybe commit to something now that Saturn is starting to be visible. It might be time to take action or take a risk in some way. This energy with Saturn and Uranus also might bring a tension point between what's been building since the grand conjunction. This to me is a little bit more of a new year, new me energy. Not quite. I would probably wait a little bit more until Mercury is no longer retrograde. But it's sort of like this, it's an emerging sense of where to from here with 2021. Also, too, as this happens, as this angle between these two planets really perfect, we've also got a Moon Uranus conjunction. Okay, so this is again going to, so, the moon is kind of really amplifying or making it sort of, I guess, like known or visible, something radical or risky. The moon is like, come on, like go for it there. Okay. And there's this sense of maybe a reward if you push on with that plan. Um, going for what you commit to or what is important to you. And there's almost like this sort of feeling here of, if I don't take the risk or if I don't strike while the iron's hot, I might lose my opportunity. Particularly, as the astrology of this aspect perfects, we've also got the sun hanging at the end of a fixed sign there. So there's almost, when a planet is at the end of a fixed sign, especially, there's almost this, if you take that leap or if you take that step, there's no turning back. Okay, so be mindful of what you may say yes to or what you don't say yes to during this this time. So as we note, Mercury is also at the station degree as this happens. So very shortly thereafter, it's going to start stationing direct. Okay, so again, it's this idea of communication, logistics, even your thinking and your thoughts around these events. It's like making a decision, damned if I do, damned if I don't is a possibility, or if I don't kind of go for it, I'll never get that chance again. So as Mercury stations, hits the brakes and stations and starts to turn retrograde again, it is sandwiched between the two, gas giants, Jupiter and Saturn. So this might help you with the ability to discuss events or start to envision or take practical action around some of the goals or desires that might have started coming up from around mid-January. And this may be, just a passing influence, but if you're a Mercury dominant person, or if you have Mercury as a perfection lord this year or something along those lines, plans and details or contracts or conversations or things that are in the pipeline may really start to materialize. So this can be an exciting time where there might have been that tension point, or have I made the right choice, or should I or shouldn't I? But things starting to come together. So then that sort of the 17th through the 20th, 21st could be a little bit of a testing, tricky time. What I like about Mercury stationing direct is now it's turning away from Saturn and moving towards Jupiter. So as Mercury picks up the pace again slowly, it's looking towards the great benefic instead of the great malefic. So in terms of your practical planning or your thoughts or ideas around your Aquarius house or your future visions for the year, there's a sense of faith, there's a sense of optimism or hope as we move forward. I also kind of like that the sun is at 2 degrees of Pisces, which as far as Jupiter gets, for the most part this year. So I think this is going to be a real turning point away from Saturn themes and moving towards something maybe a little bit more ideal or what's possible. So there's that idea of what's possible, Jupiter, but what's practical, Saturn. So a sense of plans, sort of coming to fruition or eventuating. Also, too, this is Jupiter and Mercury, and they are the rulers of the lunar nodes right now. So this might be a part of your eclipse story coming together as well, or just integrating information and ideas with maybe the concept of belief as well. So your own ideas versus the truth, or what is fact and what is fiction. So that is sort of like the really big overarching picture for the month of February. Then by the 18th, 19th, the sun moves into Pisces, which we've sort of already highlighted there. So by that stage, we're starting to really move out of the Aquarius lineup, and Venus will follow suit on the 25th of the month. So she'll be there with the sun. And then the month kind of rounds out. So we've got the new moon in Aquarius. That was the 11th, 12th. I mentioned that one already. And then the month kind of rounds out with the new moon in Virgo. So that happens, new moon in Virgo, just check my notes here. It's the 27th and it's the 27th in all time zones. So that happens at 8 degrees of Virgo. I think this is going to be a really wonderful anecdote to a very, very airy month. I'm just tweaking that around so we can get it a little bit more exact. So we've got there 8 degrees of Virgo. So this is great for maybe organizing or structuring or planning all of these big ideas, dreams, and visions that Aquarius can promise. It will be a really great time to come back to Earth as well. And that might be through diet, nourishing foods, healthy foods, exercise, anything that kind of helps to get you out of your head and reduce the stress. So get organized, clear out space, clear out the clutter. Any type of maybe lifestyle cleanse or lifestyle adjustments would be really supported under this full moon. So for some, that might be less sugar and alcohol, maybe even some more stodgy or comfort foods to help you bring you back down to earth, which will probably be required after this huge air month in a very futuristic sign like Aquarius. So if you like this video, please hit the subscribe button if you're catching this on YouTube. Make a comment, tell me what you're looking forward to most this month. And if you do like these videos, please look into the Golden Circle where I offer these deeper insights for you each and every month. It's my little golden circle of astrological community, guidance, and support. So until next time, bye for now.